Hello everyone! So in this video you will learn how to deploy a Docker project into ElasticBeanstalk. In my case, I have a NestJS project, which is a framework for NodeJS with a more complex configuration. So here on my package.json, I'm using a library called bcrypt. But bcrypt requires Python 3 to be installed and configured on your machine for encrypting user password. So I'm using bcrypt to encrypt user passwords, and bcrypt requires Python 3 to be properly installed. For doing this, you have two options. You can create a EB extensions folder on your ElasticBeanstalk project, and then you put your configuration into EB extensions. I'm gonna attach some links in the video so you can learn more about it. And I also have another video that I used EB extensions for configuring ElasticBeanstalk. Or you can create a Docker project with your configuration in it and then do everything that needs to be done using Docker. But before we proceed, if you like this kind of content, just give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so we can learn more about Docker, Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, and so on. And don't forget about it. The more you learn, the better you become and more value you can provide. Okay, so let's do this. First of all, let's open up AWS console, and once you arrived here, search for ElasticBeanstalk. If it's here or already available for you, then just click here. Otherwise, search for ElasticBeanstalk on the search bar. Perfect. Now let's create a new application. I'm gonna call it npcsj Docker project. Perfect. Now on the platform section, let's choose Docker. And then I'm gonna configure more options because I want to make sure that our machine has some RAM for not having memory issues while trying to build the machine. I'm gonna click to configure more options, and then I'm gonna scroll down to the capacity section. This is quite similar to what we did before on my previous video. So I want to demonstrate something to you. I'm gonna create two environments. The first one will be using x86 and another one will be using ARM64. And then you will understand something at the end of the video. So watch out, and then you will understand something which is really important for you to deploy your project successfully on ElasticBeanstalk. So first of all, this project will use an x86 architecture. I'm gonna choose a T3.medium. I think this one is a 4 GB machine. We can check this out on AWS pricing calculator. Then we click to create estimate. Let's search for EC2 because ElasticBeanstalk uses CloudFormation and EC2 under the hood. So let's click to EC2, into EC2, and then let's search for T3 medium figure, and then I'm gonna search for T3.medium, and then you will see that this machine has 4 GB of RAM, so probably it's gonna work pretty well for our project. And then I'm gonna choose T3 medium, and then I'm gonna click on save. Perfect. Now let's check the security section. If you want to connect with your machine using SSH, then you have to select a key pair, just like we did previously. And then let's create the app. Perfect. While the project is being created, I'm gonna create another one using ARM64. So let's go back here and create a new environment. In this case, it's gonna be a web server as well. I'm gonna call it npcsj Docker ARM64. You can put the name that you want here. This is just for testing. And then I'm gonna choose Docker as a platform. And then I'm gonna click to configure more options. Perfect. I'm going into the capacity section. Click to edit. In this case, I'm gonna pick an ARM64 machine. and then let's search for a machine that has ARM64 architecture and 4 GB of RAM. I'm gonna choose a T4G medium in this case. T4G.medium. Perfect. And then let's click on save. And then on the security section, if you want to connect with your machine using SSH, then again just go into the EC2 key pair and create a key pair. And again, if you don't have a key pair, you need to go into the EC2 section and create a new key pair. And then let's click just save. In this case, this is an ARM64 machine. Let's confirm it. Perfect. This is an ARM64 machine. And then let's click to create an environment. Perfect. In a few minutes, perfect. The first machine is already configured. Great. So while the second machine is being configured, let's try to deploy our code into this Docker environment. Again, let's go back to our code. This is my Dockerfile that runs my code. And then let's zip this whole project and deploy the zipped file into ElasticBeanstalk. So here I have a file, a simple bash script file, which is capable to zip my project and to create a zipped file. And then I'm gonna send the zipped file into ElasticBeanstalk. So let's do this. So here I am on the terminal. I'm gonna find this scripts folder into the terminal. Perfect. Here you can see the file on the terminal. Then let's run it. Zip project. Perfect. This is the file. And then I'm gonna try to send this file into ElasticBeanstalk. Now let's click to upload and deploy and look for the file. So this is my file that I've just created. And then I'm gonna click to upload and then upload the file. Deploy it by clicking on deploy. Perfect. Now it's gonna take a few minutes, and then if you see the green light, it's perfect. Your project is gonna be correctly deployed. If not, then you need to make some extra changes that we're going to do on the next section. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the other project, on the ARM64 machine. Probably this is the one. Okay, I'm gonna deploy the same file here. Upload and deploy. Now this is gonna take a few minutes for deploying the projects. So let's see. It's being deployed here. Okay, great. So after some time, you can see that both projects failed to be deployed on ElasticBeanstalk. And this is because my Dockerfile is quite big and it takes some time to Docker image to be built. So if you want to investigate more the causes for the issues, you can go into the log section and then you can have like a brief version of what happened, clicking on the last 100 lines. And then you click on last 100 lines and then you click to see it. So if you can't see what happened here, in my case I can only see that an error occurred into the build section. Then you can go back here and click to see the full logs. But in my case, I already know what happened. It's because my Docker file is quite big, so then I need to cache the machine configuration somewhere else and then read from that new Docker image to build my new Docker image. So this might be a bit confusing. Basically what happened is, because my Docker file, the creation of my Docker image is quite big, so I need to move the machine configuration somewhere else and then to cache this machine configuration and then read from this new image into this Docker image. So basically we're gonna cache this somewhere else and then read from the cache into here. This is gonna speed up the creation for our Docker image into ElasticBeanstalk, and then probably I'm not gonna have timeout issues anymore. So there are multiple ways to do this. If you want to keep everything inside into the AWS ecosystem, I highly recommend you to use ECR or Elastic Container Registry. So what is Elastic Container Registry? This is a place for you to put your Docker images privately or publicly on AWS. This is equivalent to Docker Hub, but inside the AWS ecosystem. So let's do this. I'm gonna create a new repository on ECR. Click in here, and then I'm gonna call it npcsj docker project machine. You can put the name that you want here, and then I'm gonna select a private Docker image repository, and then let's create it. Okay, only lowercase letters. So I'm gonna call it. Okay, great. So here we have an empty repository created on ECR, and then I'm going to push my code to here, my Docker image, to this repository, and then I'm gonna read from the repository created here into the ElasticBeanstalk project. So let's go back to our code. This is the Dockerfile. I'm basically going to split this into two parts. So from the copy from this line to the end, this is what is dynamic, which means this is what exactly is related to my code, and previously actually from the exposed line. So from the line 45 and onwards, it's our project, and before this is the configuration for the machine. So I'm gonna copy this whole part here. Actually, I'm gonna cut, and then I'm going to create inside this scripts folder. I'm going to create another folder called Docker images, and then here I'm going to create an empty Dockerfile. I'm going to move the code to this place. This is the Dockerfile which is going to create the Docker image that configures the machine. So here we are reading from Amazon Linux 2. In your case, you can use whatever image that you want, but I'm using Amazon Linux 2 to keep the whole thing inside the AWS ecosystem. And then here I am configuring the machine to install Python 3.10, and then I install some extra libraries, and then I install Node, and then I install Yarn, and then I install NestJS CLI. Oh, I have a duplicate here. Yes, so this is it basically. And now that I have this new Docker file here, I am going to build this image and push it to ECR. For doing this, you can click here into ECR to view the push commands, and then basically you follow these steps to push your Docker file into ECR. I'm gonna copy the first command, and then I'm going into that folder that contains this new Docker file. cd docker images. Perfect. Here on the terminal I can see my new Docker file, and then I'm gonna run the first command. Okay, so in my case the command failed because I need to start the Docker image on my machine. Depending on your operating system, it's already running, but in my case, since I'm using Mac, I need to start the Docker engine. If you're using Ubuntu or another Linux version, maybe it's already running on your machine, but in my case I need to start the engine. Okay, perfect. Now that the Docker image is running here, I am going to run the command again. Perfect. Now the first command succeeded. Let's run the next one. I'm gonna build the Docker image. Perfect. Now I'm gonna tag the new Docker image, and then I'm gonna push this new Docker image to ECR. Okay, great. So after some time, the push commands are complete, and then if we go back into AWS console and then refresh the page, you will see that now I have the latest version here, which is the one that I pushed previously from my machine into ECR. Okay, great. So the parts that were removed from our original Docker file, we're gonna read from this new ECR created now instead of running the commands directly. So I'm gonna click here into copy URI. So I'm gonna read from the new URI. So that's pretty much it, basically. So Docker now will read from ECR instead of running the commands directly. So this ECR has the cached version of all the commands that I executed here, so the deployment will be faster, and probably we're not gonna have timeout issues anymore. Okay, great. And then I just changed this line here, and then I'm gonna delete the file that I created previously. And then I'm gonna run the script to zip the project again. I'm gonna run zip project. Great, this is the new file. Let's go back into ElasticBeanstalk. And then let's go into both projects. I'm going to deploy this file into the ARM64 environment. I'm gonna click here to upload and deploy. Choose the file. This is the file. Upload it. And then deploy. And then I'm gonna do the same into the x86 environment. Go back here, click to upload and deploy, choose the file, the same file, and upload and deploy. Okay, great. Okay, perfect. So after a few minutes, you can see that the ARM64 version was deployed successfully. And then if we click here, you can see the message from my app, hello world from NestJS app, which is the message that I defined here on my application. App controller, hello world from NestJS app. And then when we go back to see the x86 version, you can see that the deployment failed. This is what I wanted to explain from the beginning of the video, because when I had to create a new Dockerfile with the cached version from the machine, but because that I had to build this Docker image on my computer, it's gonna follow the same directives from my processor, and the processor for my computer is the M1 Pro from Apple, and the M1 Pro uses the ARM64 architecture. So because of this Dockerfile and the Docker project will only work if I use the same architecture on ElasticBeanstalk. So since I had to create a Docker image here and deploy it into ECR from an ARM64 processor and machine, so the project and the ECR image will only work on ARM64 machines, and it's not gonna work on x86 machines. So this is why the project was successfully deployed on the ARM64 machine, but it failed on the x86. And so if your computer uses an x86 processor, probably it's going to be the opposite. The x86 will work perfectly, but the ARM64 will fail. And that's pretty much it. Besides this, if your project needs to read from ECR, just like my case here, my Dockerfile is pushing the Docker image from ECR. If you need to do this into your ElasticBeanstalk project, you will need to grant the permissions for the IAM role to do this. So if we go into configuration, and then we go into the security section, click to edit. So this is the IAM instance profile that I'm using, AWS ElasticBeanstalk EC2 role. If I look for this role into the IAM section, and then I scroll down to the roles and look for that role, let me check the name again. It's AWS ElasticBeanstalk EC2 role. So this is the role. You will need this permission. Amazon EC2 container registry read only. So if you don't put this permission and then you try to use ECR into your project, just like my case here, the deployment will fail again. So you need to put this permission into your IAM instance profile. So if your IAM instance profile doesn't have this permission, the deployment will fail. Okay, great, so that's it. After doing this, your deployment probably will succeed, just like it happened here. So you need to pay attention to this. When you try to deploy a Docker project into ElasticBeanstalk, if your Dockerfile is quite small, then probably it's going to work in your first attempt. Then if you have a bigger Dockerfile, probably you need to break it into smaller parts, and then you need to cache the machine configuration, just like I did here, into a separate Dockerfile, and then you need to build this Docker image and then push the Docker image into ECR, and then you read from the new ECR into your original Docker file. And then you try again the deployment, but you need to make sure that the architecture for the machine running on ElasticBeanstalk uses the same architecture that you used to build the Docker image. And then you also need to make sure that your IAM instance profile has the permissions to read from ECR. And that's it. After doing this, you will have a successfully deployed Docker project into ElasticBeanstalk. So if you have any doubt, just ask me on the comment section and then I will answer you later on. So if you like this kind of content, just give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget about it. The more you learn, the better you become and more value you can provide. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next time.